Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
Welcome. This is the Have You Heard podcast. This is episode 35. We're going to talk today about sprayer drones. I'm Morgan Hayes. I'm an assistant professor in Biosystems and Ag Engineering at the University of Kentucky, focusing on livestock facilities. And in my personal life, my husband and I farm in Boyle County, Kentucky, about a 500-acre commercial cattle and hay operation.
I'm Josh Jackson, assistant professor in Biosystems and Agriculture Engineering as well. I focus on precision livestock farming. In my home life, we raise registered Angus cattle and also focus on hay production.
Okay, Josh. So before we get started on our topic, sprayer drones, which is really a topic primarily for you, I have lots of questions, but less thoughts, more questions. Let's start out with what's been happening on the farm this week.
So a little bit, we got one of our tractors back from the shop, and so that's been good. It's one of our smaller tractors, so we can do more of that finesse and a little bit of bush hogging around and small objects in small fields. So that's been one thing. Performed a little bit of bush hogging, so getting ready for bringing calves home back from another farm to get them calved for the fall. So getting some bush hogging done, and pretty much just prior to getting the calves in there, and had a couple neighbors calves visit, and so we just had to run around and figure out we need to be in better shape. So
yeah, we had a little fencing repair work as well to do this week. I had a couple of animals decide to join and visit the neighbor. They came back on their own. They decided there wasn't enough grass on a mowed yard to spend too much time there. But the fact that they decided they could go through and then back through is a pretty good indication that we needed to work on that fence. Aside from that, we also have been doing bush hogging. The rain has really started allowing some grass to grow, making it a little bit more comfortable to bush hog. Been rotating cattle, allowing everything to happen. Starting this week, we're getting into checking twice a day on our cows. We are coming up on which should be the start of our calving season here this coming weekend. Well, technically Monday, but roughly Monday. It could be middle of next week.
Okay. I was getting ready to get busy here fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm. I don't know when your fall calving starts, but ours does start right around August 15th, August 20th, right in that range.
We're probably about 3 weeks out, but I like to take them home 3 weeks ahead of time. Make sure 2 weeks is almost too little time, because they can occasionally come about 2 weeks
early, especially a heifer. For some reason, heifers tend. I think there is some data that actually shows that heifers do calve a little bit earlier. But I have always found that the heifers tend to come early.
And so that always is, the heifer coming early is a little bit of surprise. So you want to be ready, especially if you have to pull her and do anything with her. So just 3 weeks to give ourselves a little bit of additional leeway. So.
Yeah, and we've rotated one of our groups so that they're in a more prominent place where we see them more often. They're on the farm that my parents live on, so that now they're up next to the driveway and stuff where when they come in and out, they can see the group a little bit better, which is nice. We'll still go out and do real checks twice a day for them, but that also helps just to have, because that's actually where the heifers are going to calve, is on that farm. So
okay,
they're very visible currently in their new location. So that should be good for the beginning of the calving season. Aside from that, the bush hogging, I think, is probably important. We're at the point where I think if we get a good bush hogging done here in middle of August, we probably won't have to bush hog again. We'll have weeds under control enough that we won't feel the need to hit the field another time, unless we have a lot of cocklebur or something like that in a field.
Right.
Then we'll have one more. If it gets drier here in the fall, we'll have one more time. We'll have to hit some fields, but we're making progress on that, which is good.
Yeah, a lot of my fields I was able to bush hog. We had that dry spell, bush hog fairly close, and had all that rain. They've come out looking a lot better at this point.
And we have had rain this week, so I assume, like you, we have not done any hay yet. That's still on our agenda. But it has not been the right window as of yet.
Yep, and we're same boat. We're kind of just twiddling our thumbs, and I was talking to Matt Dixon about Thursday, Friday, but we'll wait and see. Oh no, he said wait and see.
Yeah, I think we're going to cut something on Thursday afternoon, but a small field. But it's a field that has pretty good high quality grasses in it that we may square bale.
Okay.
Something that takes more time to get up, but it's not a large enough field. Typically, you wouldn't bale it by itself, but because we're going to square bale it, it gives us. It looks like we have a sweet spot window right now to get that done, but it looks like a dicey enough window that we're not going to do any of our larger hay fields, any of our 20, 30, 40 acre.
Right. Don't take a big risk.
We're not going to take a huge risk, and if we have to, we can get it up in round bales, and we still might get a third cutting off of that small field. So anyway, that's sort of on our agenda. That's now we've gone into what we're doing next week, right at the very beginning of the show. But it is what it is. So let's talk a little bit about the topic of the day, which is sprayer drones, because you just went out and did
a talk. Yeah, I was down in Meade County. They had a sprayer drone down there, so it's a fairly good setup. And actually, we had just finished up a couple pubs, and they're still in review, but on sprayer drones and the economics behind it. So it looks like, in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense to actually get a sprayer drone potentially for farmers.
And what size farm do you think you'd have to be to justify a sprayer drone, or what type of operation?
It would, really, I think it's going to, right now, it's primarily corn to some degree. It's a corn-based operation, just due to you need a higher spray volume of doing a lot of herbicides. So with the fungicide, you can get away with a much lower spray volume. So I think they're saying 2 gallons per acre. I know some of the farmers sound like they're doing down to 1.5 gallons per acre.
Okay.
Getting away with that. So some of it was just the gallons per acre. A lot of it, I think, is going to be primarily in corn, but there are, I think, opportunities, for spot spraying. So if we have the cockroaches, if there are large patches, which would typically probably be around wherever you had fed hay, that would probably just be a spot that you would spray or identify and spray. So right now, most of it seemed to be just going out and grid pattern on the field, but I think there's opportunities for spot spraying.
Interesting. And do you think that most people, this is just a curiosity thing, but to me, I've always thought spray drones and spraying in general was something that was maybe an appropriate thing especially on cattle operations or non-crop operations, non-grain crop operations, maybe to be accurate, because I think hay is a crop. No, I don't want to be technical about it. Yeah. But on like a non-grain operation, is that something that should be hired out anyway? Is that something that we should be looking at like as a off the farm business opportunity for some people, or is it something that?
I mean, it's definitely an off the farm business opportunity, because I think if there is one thing I think a lot of people need is somebody to, we need the flexibility. And so a lot of times if you're a much larger farm in the western part of the state, you can hire a helicopter. You got the big square fields to get some larger equipment out there, big spray rig. However, when you get to smaller farms, smaller fields, odd shaped fields, you get a lot of waterways, and especially with as wet as it's been this past, surprisingly this past July, it's actually a sprayer drone makes a lot of sense, because you could technically go out there after it rains and potentially spray if you had to.
So even if you knew you only had like a day or day and a half dry window, you could still go out and spray and before that sun.
Yep.
And have a full day of sun before more rain came in, and it might actually be effective.
Yeah. So there's opportunities there. I think the drone does give you a lot of flexibility. So you're not running over it. You're not creating a lot of those, but you will have a lot of refills to that take place.
So do you think that that's how it's going to be utilized, as more for spot targeted stuff, or do you think it's going to be used more for just general?
I think a little bit of both. If you have corn, it's going to be general. If you see Plumber Amaranth in that field, you're spraying the whole field. That's a yes, no decision.
Right.
But I could see if you have a cattle operation or something else, maybe a smaller mid-sized farm, where it could be more for spot treatments of bad areas, or even, I was talking to the individuals, they hadn't quite done this yet. I was like, have you tested out for fence line spraying? And so, just spray your fence line. You could probably just drive down and do it as well, but if you have the drone, could save you a little bit of time potentially.
I will just generally comment on this, and this is not a bash on my particular local energy co-op, but it is. They recently came in and sprayed under all of their electric wires. and killed a bunch of weeds and tall succession type trees, not necessarily desirable trees, although possibly they were desirable. It's hard to tell, and they're all dead now. But they did not, it was not a very selective spray, and they did it from the ground. They did it primarily from the roads, and they haven't necessarily cleaned up afterwards. But I could see where they could have been more targeted in their spray with something else, like maybe a drone, rather than trying to spray from the road back 20 or 30 feet. And they did kill a lot of stuff in their easements. Like they took out a lot of things that didn't necessarily need to come out, just because that was how they could get a spray where they wanted it under the trees rather than coming in and doing manual cutting.
Huh.
But I could see where a drone or something like that might be particularly useful in that area. And I would love, personally, if they would come in where I have a lot of natural gas lines, large transmission natural gas lines on some of my properties, if they would come in and spray to kill in those. Because sometimes they will come in and do mechanical cutting, but sometimes they will selectively choose not to mechanically cut a tree that's clearly over a gas line. It makes me very nervous. So I actually could see some value not only for farmers, but also for some of the utilities in our area, which they already fly helicopters very low over those gas lines anyway. I think I was telling someone that the other day.
Actually, I was up in Campbell County with Michelle, and we actually saw them out there with the big helicopter chainsaw rig they have out there.
Yeah.
And just thinking, they could probably spray that.
Well, and actually they're supposed to come in and walk or check the lines, and so they've started using helicopters, at least in our area, to check all of the gas lines to make sure that there's not a lot of growth over top of them. There's not things that they have to remove. And they do have the easements. They're allowed to come across anyone's property. But sometimes if the fences are locked and they're electrified and things like that, they won't come in. Or they will come in and they will open up a gate and not close it. I would be a lot happier if they just sent out a message and came through with a sprayer drone and used some sort of a herbicide and really knocked down.
Well, and seeing that situation there, you almost need potentially 2 drones in my mind, because you need one go through and look at what you have.
Yep.
And then come through and spray. And possibly fly an imaging one again just to see, was there anything missed? Did it do something resistant? And then you can spot spray whatever wasn't responding to the herbicide.
Yeah, and I think it would probably be a very cost-effective alternative to bringing in crews to do a lot of the work, because, we talked to one of the crews that came through because they needed to get on the farm, and they actually asked us before they cut our lock, which was pleasant. Appreciated, at least.
Yeah.
And we actually directed them to the right spot and threw the electric fences in such a way that they weren't going to destroy all of our temporary fencing that was up on the farm. And they were extremely nice about, going through gates and doing what they needed to not tear things up. But I've had other issues where people have not done that. So,
because that's very person dependent almost.
Yeah, it's very much a crew dependent decision as to how they are going to manage access onto farms, because they do have full right to go in as they need to. But I could really see where you could save money by using drones. I mean, even the helicopter flying, I think, is still significantly cheaper than putting man hours on the ground.
Yep.
But I could see where drones would be even more effective.
Right, because you could pull there on the farm and then just take off. Because that's the neat thing about these, is the bird will take off and landing. You can pretty much go anywhere, and then you don't have to worry as much about hillsides, topography, and you can set your flight height, and it's got enough of so that the ones that we were flying have the radar sensor, have the collision avoidance, where you should be generally safe to fly.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's an interesting concept, and certainly, I can see a lot of potential, both from a farmer perspective and then also from a utility perspective. Which maybe that's not exactly what they were trying to sell in Meade County when you were out for the field day, but just on a personal note, I observe a lot of it just because of how many utilities we have on our farms.
And even, for me, just doing the evaluation, trying to figure out just the cost standpoint and everything else, I think in my mind, it's kind of like the go big or go home with the drones, with the sprayer drones. So there's you have two classes, under 55 pounds and over 55 pounds. And so I'd almost say get the largest one, just because if you're going to go through, and I mean, it's just a couple more exemptions. Like the license to fly is the same. There's a couple more exemptions. You have to submit them anyway to your flight standards district office. So if you're doing it, you might as well just do it for the bigger one, in my opinion. And it's only about $4,000 more going from the smaller one to the largest one.
Interesting. $4,000 more in terms of
Purchase price.
Okay.
And so, but you go from 10 liters to 30 liters right now. It's the biggest one we can legally fly.
So what is that? What would they generally be covering, just out of curiosity, with a 10 liter? If you had a sprayer drone that held 10 liters, how much could you cover on a typical field? Just general coverage, not spot coverage.
General coverage, it'll vary, I think, but depending on how much you're spraying, I guess. And so how much you're spraying will affect how much ground you can cover. So I think, they'll say maybe 15, 20 acres an hour potentially.
Okay.
And I think you could achieve that. On your bigger ones, they'll say about 44, 45, somewhere in that range. I think it's more actually around 30 acres. 30 acres per hour by the time you have to change batteries out
and
refill.
Okay.
So change out time is actually half your time is probably getting up to the point where you need to fly, and then the other half is probably just other portion of your time. So it calculates up to about half. If your portion of your time is varying, going from where you take off to the actual location to spray, the other portion is just you changing out battery, changing out adding your fluids.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty significant amount of the time that's then spent doing that. So can you fly multiple at once, or is it too cumbersome to fly multiple if you're continuously trying to change out?
So you can fly him multiple at once. Well, you can fly multiple of the smaller drones. And so really, if you're flying multiple, you actually need to have a visual observer at that point. With the larger one, I think, and I've done some of the math, that you'd almost need two of the smaller ones to actually equal that one big one.
Okay.
From a coverage standpoint, what you can actually do. So it almost makes more sense. That's why I say go big or go home. It makes more sense to my mind because of that. It's not just your larger tank, and that saves you some of that switch out time. It's also a wider spray width. It's the operating speed is about the same, but that spray width, the larger pump, so flow rate is really important as well. So you go from having maybe a flow rate of 3 to 5 liters per minute to 8, and it actually creates a significant difference.
Interesting. It's pretty interesting. I see drones certainly having a place in the future. And I know you do a lot of the visual stuff with the drones, but I see this being a technology that might get taken up much faster.
I think it's definitely being utilized by a lot of farmers. It's definitely, I think, taken off in Ohio. I think in the western part of the state, I know there's at least, just in the past year, 4 or 5 larger drones that are being utilized out there that I know of. And there's actually it's more than that.
Yeah.
So there's a number of larger drones that are being utilized, and I think it was just from a lot of the farmers bought them just because they couldn't get a helicopter or spray to take place when they actually needed to.
Yeah. The other thing I know some people that have is they want photography of their farms from, and people that used to do it with helicopters and stuff, and moving to drones to do.
Oh yeah,
but there's a lot of small business opportunities.
I mean, you can even do real estate. So a lot of them, if you're taking pictures for real estate, weddings are another big thing. So, and the insurance isn't that bad. At least for the smaller ones, the insurance isn't bad because if you're using it on your farm, it might be covered under your homeowner's insurance. If you're using it
on a commercial
operation, I think there's ones where you can pay either per flight or per month or per year. So there's lots of different options for it. Lots of flexibility.
Now, what about if you are actually spraying? And other than you probably need a sprayer's license and you need some things like that, pesticide licenses. But how is the insurance for?
So originally, and so like right now, according to my knowledge, we don't have something readily available from like Farm Bureau or different insurance companies. So it's a dedicated aviation insurance, and I think it had been fairly pricey. but I think it's coming down
Okay.
just because they're realizing they had, it is with your larger drone, when you register it, it is an N-series aircraft. It's an aircraft.
Interesting.
And so below 55, it's still a remotely piloted vehicle. It's a drone. It's a UAV, UAS. But the other ones they consider is actually a actual aircraft.
Okay.
And so I can search a database and see, who's actually registered their drone
Interesting.
or registered their plane.
Right.
Yeah, excuse me. Who's registered their plane for the big ones.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it had been expensive coming down. I think I just got to make sure, and see how it works for people.
I mean, it's fascinating. I think of all the technologies that are out there right now, that's one that I see potential uptake on, a very quick uptake on, which, sometimes you anticipate that correctly and sometimes you don't. It's a good thing I don't have a lot of money to invest in the stock market because I'd probably be in trouble. But I just see a lot of real world application for it. And I can see where it would make a lot of economic sense.
And so it's a lot of times, the funny thing is I talk to the farmers who do actually go out there and fly. A lot of times, the main stress point for them is just being out there in the sun.
Yeah.
Getting a good setup where you can be over the crop or get a rig where you can actually go out there to the field and, fly from the top of a box truck essentially.
Right.
And so, or the back of a trailer.
I mean, they don't just climb up on their grain bins and sit up there in the heat at like 130 degrees on top.
So getting they joked around, but getting that, umbrella or getting even a fan out there.
Oh, yeah. Well, you had a student, this is, maybe you didn't want to tell the story, but you had a student that did a lot of drone work, and basically he had a setup with his lawn chair and an umbrella and...
Lawn chair and umbrella. So that was the way he went out there and flew, and it actually worked, I think it's made it
bearable, probably. Bearable. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of hours in the sun.
It's fatigue, and it's operational fatigue.
Yep. So that's a fair point.
So you're out there. Heck, I went out there. We're trying to chase them cats. I was probably good for about 20 minutes.
I will say that we recently traveled to Houston for a conference. You and I bought a stroller fan for my son, for my toddler son. And I'm pretty convinced now that I need one of those every time I go outside. I'm not sure that that's a good sign that I have learned that about myself, but I was like, this little fan for $15 or $20 is a very good investment, and it's got little knobs on the bottom that I can like sort of attach it to
anything and everything.
And I was like, this is what I might need on the tractor with me. I might need on my open station tractor. I should clarify that. In case
open station, yeah.
That's how you know I don't drive the tractor too fast. But I don't know. That it's a fair concern. So interesting.
I think for me, looking from the outside in, there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah,
a lot of opportunities, and just I think we have this economy right now where there's a lot of shortages as far as labor, and so if you can find that niche, I think people are willing to compensate you for your time. Maybe not quite the helicopter rate, but
right.
It's definitely below that, but you're still, I think return on investment potentially within 2,500 to 5,000 acres.
Wow.
And so that'd be, pretend that the larger drone, that'd be about a 3-week period.
Pretty amazing.
For return on investment.
That's really impressive actually to consider as a part-time job or an off-the-farm income for someone who wants to farm. I mean, at this point, I think for beginning farmers, it's a big question: is how do you afford to do it? And something like this, if you could spray 1 or 2 days a week for
8-10 hours and whatever it took, potentially or weekends or weekends, even 3 or 4 weekends. Then there's opportunities, I think, for even the herbicide applications. Potentially you might have a little more concentration, a little more spray volume per acre, but there's opportunities, I think, because then you're not even running over the ground even further. You're not
compacting,
you're not even potentially running over and losing a bushel per acre potentially.
That's amazing. So well, that's pretty interesting.
They're neat machines. I definitely am a fan.
It's probably pretty inspiring to go see what's out there too commercially at a field day like that.
And they have a couple different manufacturers, and so you can tell there's some that are going to be a little more advanced, and some where they have to work out a little more kinks. And so I've seen a little bit of both, and there's definitely do your research and to figure out where you want to make your investment. Talk to others who potentially have it.
Interesting. Okay, I think with that, let's wrap up for the day and just talk a little bit about what we're doing on our farms next week, and then
let's see. We're going to be moving all the cows from one farm to another, and then the other cows back from our home farm to the other farm. So we're going to just be shuffling every animal we have, essentially.
Basically, you're going to spend most of your life moving animals in the trailer.
Yes. And I'm pretty much assuming that's just going to be the weekend.
That sounds like, it probably is going to be the weekend. It takes a long time to move cattle. Yeah, we personally have, we had one calf come up with a little bit of a runny eye. I don't know that it's a true pink eye situation, but get her treated tonight. My husband got her caught, so we'll have to just get her treated later. And then aside from that, we are intending to do hay. That's still on our agenda. We'll see if we are confident enough to actually do it or not, but it's been drying out well this week. Yep. Despite the rain that was supposed to come in, we haven't had any yet. So
we're kind of in the same boat. We got a couple tenths here and there.
Yeah, we've had a bunch of days that we could see it rain within a couple miles, but it's actually missed us. So our ground has dried out pretty well. So I think it'll be okay, even if it does rain some later today, which it's still calling for. I think the ground will take the water in. It won't be sopping wet. So the goal is still to do a little bit of hay and that maybe a little bit of bush hogging, although I think we got most of it done last week. And moving alpacas, of course, that's a regular task that we have to do because they are basically a lawnmower that we move around by trailer. We have a couple small lots that are just inconvenient to mow, but it's very easy to move the alpaca onto them.
And just say good luck and come back in a week or two, I guess.
Yep, and they can usually last where we're placing them for a few weeks, and then we move them onto a new grass. We could probably leave them where they are a little bit longer, but water is also a challenge with them. We have to manually water them in a number of these locations. So depending on who's around and who has time sometimes depends on where they go.
Okay, that makes sense. And so that, I guess we're done for this week.
Yeah, we're done for this week. We'll be back next week with another
exciting
podcast.
Topic.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
Bye.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.